Lokati here. Today we are doing an update to the Seraph's Blade Healing Hands Paladin build. We're also going to include a look at the Forge Guard option, which I think is very strong. And we'll look at dual wield versus two-handed versus shield, because those are going to be the primary build options that people are looking at. I also want to give a quick shout out to B Jarny 1992 and JM V4MZ for posting in the comments on YouTube asking for an update. I was distracted playing Path of Exile launch and just didn't see the patch and didn't pay attention to patch notes. But you can come by and see my PoE build there this week. I'll have a video up for it sometime. As far as the Paladin goes, no major changes to the build. There's just a shift away from cast speed and back to attack speed with some small itemization changes. Ideally, we would run Frostbite Shackles with 2 LP with attack speed and ward per second, but seeing as how the gold duping bug has abused the market and the 2 LP Frostbite Shackles are now in the villains, we're not going to worry about that. You could run Frostbite Shackles with just attack speed and then Last Steps of the Living as a source of ward per second. But we're going to be running Shackles with ward per second and Solarons because I don't have any Shackles with attack speed already on them. So we're going to start off with our 1K Corruption Monolith here. And then we're going to be using a Volcanus, which is slammed with crit chance, attack speed, and shred armor. Now, if you can't afford it, you can't find a 3 LP Volcanus, you can just put melee crit chance and attack speed on it. Apathy's Maw is also a good choice. You want melee attack speed and crit chance on it. And then obviously we have our dual wield options down here as well. I think as before, the two-handed option offers you damage that is in between the dual wield and the shield, but is more defensive because you don't take the extra damage for dual wielding. I think right now it may be one of the best options because the way the attack speed scales in two-handed swords especially, you attack very, very fast. So you can see we hit somewhere between 7 and 15k depending on how many shred armors we have up and depending on what mods that mob that you're fighting has. Ward generation is going to be somewhere around 45 to 50k consistently. And of course, we're hitting twice per swing, just like before. We can do the math later on the number of swings that we're getting, just so that we can get a relative idea of how much we're putting out here. But everything works pretty nice and smoothly. Nothing complicated here. Two-hander is really good because of the huge attack speed just on the two-hander, but that only works if you have a good two-hander that you can put this T5 attack speed node on while you still maintain or T7 attack speed node while you still maintain a T5 melee crit chance. Now, dual wield is our next option. Put the weapons in the right slots. These are not ideal weapons because we want an Eye of Reen with attack speed, and so because I don't have an Eye of Reen with attack speed, you can see we attack relatively slowly compared to the two-hander, but we just hit really freaking hard. And so we're landing hits in the 10 to 20k range instead of the 7 to 14k range. But again, you would want to run a dagger that has shred armor, and then a Reen with T7 melee attack speed on it. That would be ideal setup for that, and that would mean that you would attack faster and get more ward. But as you can see, it works even with suboptimal gear. And we just cleave through everything with really no worry about damage that we're taking in 1000 corruption. I think this build is probably good up to probably 2000 to 2500 corruption before things start to get really sketchy, which is about where we were in arena for a relative damage incoming for the character. Now, obviously, in a normal monolith, you don't need to go through and clear all these guys that just have a ton of health for no reason. You can just rush to And we're just kind of showing you a playthrough right here. Like I said, the Apathy's Maul works as well. It doesn't do as much damage as Volcanus does because it doesn't have the Shred Armor affix that Volcanus has. So you would have to be getting Shred Armor from somewhere else. But it is a solid choice. One of the benefits of running an Apathy's Maul would be that you don't need to use a Siphon. And so your ring slot can be used for a better ring than Siphon because you would be applying Doom and your Shattered Chains benefits to Doom from Apathy's Maul. But this Volcanus is also a really good option. The Volcanus are also typically really cheap, even with LP. So if you're watching this video, go and buy a couple really quickly before the market bottoms out on those. I don't know what they're going for right now, but before the golds do, you could get a 3 LP Volcanus for like 2 million gold. And that was a steal for a 3 LP unique two-hander that had the right base. If you're not using an Apathy's Maul or Volcanus with LP, then you'll need to use a base sword that has melee crit strike chance and increased melee attack speed, which means that you really want it to be a Flamberger because that has the highest base attack rate of all the swords. Now, I'm only running 80% crit chance right now because I haven't taken the time to move my gear around to get more crit chance to compensate for using a two-hander. So if you're in that position as well, you can run a T7 melee crit chance and a T5 increased melee attack speed. That would also be a really good choice and help you get to the crit cap if you need to. The crit cap isn't necessary. It does make you clear things faster if you are at crit cap. And so crit cap is definitely a priority over attack speed. But you can see we attack really, really fast with the two-handers. That makes it a solid option. Now the other option would be a one-hander and a shield. And we can pretend we have a shield since I don't have one on me. We'll just go grab a bulwark here. Ignore my itemization. It's terrible, I know, for my organization. It's bad. Our bulwark. And so again, we're running a dagger, using attack speed now instead of cast speed, melee critical strike chance, and crit strike chance. Again, ideally you'll have one with shred armor on it. I don't have one with shred armor on it, so we're using what we got. But you can do one with shred armor. It'd be a much better choice. You can see we suffer a little bit with attack speed on here. Dagger with T7 attack speed would be a better choice than a dagger with T5 attack speed. And then you can make up for that extra crit elsewhere, but I mean, it still kills everything. Just takes a little bit longer to kill. Of course, we knew that on shield versus dual wield versus two-hander anyway. This is much, much tankier, but damage is still solid. And we'll go through everything really quickly here on our Sentinel tree. You're going to want strength and resistances, armor clad, and valiant charge. And then we put extra points into relentless so that we can get gladiator and blade master. This gives us the attack speed that we need. Over in Forge Guard, I just have an extra point in here. You don't have to put it there. It's not doing anything special. I just needed that for Fizz resistance cap at 1 point, and I haven't moved it out elsewhere. On Void Knight, you want 10 in Abyssal Endurance for the Void Resist and Fizz Resist, and then 10 in Devouring Blade, and then 1 in Void Corruption. You can take points out of here if you are capped on Void and Fizz Resist and move them somewhere else more useful. On our Paladin entry, we are getting 8 out of 8 Conviction and Defiance. We have extra points in Holy Icon just to get to Prayer. These points could be put somewhere else. If you're a shield build, they'll go in the block right here. If you wanted to get more healing effectiveness, you can go over there, but this is better healing effectiveness overall. If you wanted to use Divine Bolt, you can put it in here. These are just extra points. This happens to be the best place for them. 10 out of 10 Prayer for increased damage and increased healing effectiveness. 8 out of 8 Faith Armor, primarily for the 40% increased armor, but it can give you crit strike avoidance cap if you need it for crit strike avoidance cap. and then 1 in Divine Essence, just so we are generating Divine Essences, and then 12 out of 12 in the Light of Ra, yay, for the increased fire damage and the move speed, which is wonderful. Now, if you have extra points that can go into Reverence of Duality, it does do damage and healing effectiveness, but it does it at a much lower rate of return than most of the other skill points that are available in this tree. Now, for our passives, we are using Volatile Reversal, Standard Fare here with Time Lost Vitality, Time Lost Wisdom, Incipient Void Rift, Terminal Void Rift, and then 3 out of 3 Harbinger of Dust, and 3 out of 3 Warp to Time. So we have attack speed and up to 60% enemy damage taken. Over on Healing Hands, this was not filled out. Our damage will go up, and so we'll go back in there. You should have 2 out of 2 Bane of Evil right here. This is pretty key. Down into Seraph's Blade, we can take 2 out of 2 Virtue of Patience now because we no longer care about the cast speed penalty. And then we take our mana cost reduction, pick up our Divine Barrier for Ward per second, converting to Attunement, and then 2 out of 4 Fallen Prayer to get 4 out of 4 Urgent Healing. If you do not have +3 to Healing Hands on your Peak of the Mountain, you'll need to take 2 points out of Urgent Healing and 1 point out of Virtue of Patience, or you can take 1 point out of Urgent Healing, 1 point out of Virtue of Patience, and 1 point out of Blessed Perish. Your mana will likely be fine at just a 2 mana cost here. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could probably pull 2 out of here, and then 1 out of Virtue of Patience, and keep 4 out of 4 Urgent Healing for the increased 1. These are your points that you can use to move around here. Sigils of Hope need to look like this. So we go maximum sigils here, maximum sigils here, 4 out of 5 healing, 4 out of 5 empowering, and last wish. This automates it so you don't have to cast it except on bosses. You'll just get them while you're running around killing stuff. And this gives you mana management while you're fighting a boss so you can keep them up full time. And then lunge, 3 out of 3 from kill threshold, 1 into unstoppable, and then 4 out of 5 disarming blow, and then cooldown recovery and additional cooldown recovery. Now you can take points out of here and points out of here and go up to lunge charges. The 2 charges is nice, but I don't think it's necessary. This is just a flex way to build the skill for more utility and movement around. Now with our upgrades and our skills, we'll hop back in here, and we should be hitting significantly harder. Yeah, this puts us at 20k hits, 16 to 20k with our 2-handed weapon, which is almost 50% more than we were doing before. Make sure your healing hands is right before you go in and start killing stuff. Like I said, 2-hander now is one of the best choices. Before it was clearly dual wield, but now 2-handed healing hand Seraph Blade is much stronger because you get much harder hits than you were getting before with much higher attack speed than you were before because you could not put cast speed on a 2-handed sword. So this becomes a really, really solid option. And of course, we can revisit dual wield here. Dual wield is another really good option. It's going to attack a little bit slower. It's going to hit for a little bit harder than the 2-hander, but not a significant difference in the damage. And so I think this is where the 2-hander now is going to be superior for an overall choice than it was before, where dual wield was clearly the superior choice before. It is easier to build an itemized 1 weapon than it is to build an itemized 2 weapons as well, but the total DPS is still higher on a dual wield than it is on a 2-hander. And then of course our shield and 1-hander will now hit for much harder than it was hitting for before, since all of the scaling we were missing from there. And so your shield and 1-hander now is also a much more solid option. You can see we're hitting for 10 to 12k with just a dagger and a shield. Very, very solid damage out of the shield now. If you need more defenses, this is definitely the way to go. And then our weapon, we have a choice between running T7 attack speed or T7 crit, depending on the arrangement of your other items. For example, I would much rather be running the T7 attack speed with this dagger, but I don't have enough crit to move that over and justify it. And we would also be doing much more damage if we had shred armor on our dagger. But both of those are really important choices to make based on what kind of gear you're looking at. As I said before, the gearing priority on this is crit cap first and foremost before everything else, so that you can utilize your critical strike multiplier. The second most important thing is going to be to get your shred armor on some source. And you don't need a ton of shred armor because we attack relatively large amount of times per second, and you really only need about 25 to 35 stacks of shred armor in order to make the shred armor a really effective source. And so it's maybe like 75 to 100% shred armor is all you would really need to get a really solid baseline out of it. Now, I did say we're going to look at Forge Guard as well, because I think Forge Guard now is a much better option than it was before with the changes to gearing here. So we'll take our gear here. We're going to use the exact same gear between a Paladin and a Forge Guard. There is no difference whatsoever. Only difference is going to be in resistances, but this gear setup should cover us for resistances on the Forge Guard, just as it did for the Paladin. In fact, we'll probably be a little bit over on everything because we rolled over on most of it, as Paladin was. Ignore the fact that this guy's named as a Paladin and we rolled him as a Forge Guard. That's chat's fault. They said make a Forge Guard, and so I did. He was born to be a Paladin. Again, we'll quickly over idols again. These are all healing effectiveness idols. That is the most important thing. Just get healing effectiveness idols. You don't have a lot of sources of healing effectiveness, and so your idol is the best place for it. These happen to have physical resistance and poison resistance on them. This one is block effectiveness. That's not good. You'd rather have not increased void damage, fire penetration with melee attacks, or shred armor with fire attacks. Either of those would work, but that's not what we have. In fact, I lie. I think I have a healing effectiveness with shred armor with fire attacks. It's just lower healing effectiveness than these two, but that would be better for us. You can also get health on it if you just want a little bit more of a buffer. And with Forge Guard, you can use shred armor on hitting with throwing attacks because we are utilizing some throwing attacks with the Forge Guard version of this build. Again, your gear, you want a Peak of the Mountain with getting hands on it. We want Sentinel's Champion Regalia with increased melee damage attributes and resistances. There's our Frostbite Shackles. There's our Solaron Steps. There's our Shattered Chain. We'll go ahead and pull our shield out. There's our Siphon of Anguish. There's our Argent Crest. There's our Dagger. And there's our Healing Effectiveness Crit Multiplier. And our Healing Effectiveness Crit Ring. Go ahead and start off with this. Scaling with the two-handers on the Forge Guard versus dual wield on the Forge Guard, there's no difference, so we're not going to go over all that kind of stuff. We're just going to look at the Forge Guard in action and talk about some of the differences here. And so, obviously, you need to take Gladiator if you're into the dual wield version of this. Points in this tree are otherwise mostly the same. We are running block right now on this guy, but if you are not running block, then you would move these points over into Relentless, for example. Axe Thrower is used to fuel our throwing attacks, which we'll talk about in play. Our Paladin tree, we're getting 4 out of 8 Conviction, getting some block here, and then 10 out of 10 here. This is these points were just to get to Sigils of Hope and the Paladin tree. We know Holy Icon is better, but this is Sigils of Hope is something that we wanted to add to this build. Now for our Forge Guard Mastery, we are taking 6 out of 10 Battle Hardened. This is just for the additional armor when hit. We're taking 8 out of 10 here. We actually don't need to take this. We can move these points somewhere else, but there's not a lot of places to put points before you get to here. Now, I do want to make, I take that back, I do want to make a couple of changes to our Forge Guard tree for this build. So let's pull out of here. I do want to run Hammer and Anvil on this build. So we're going to put points in Hammer and Anvil. And then we're going to take these unnecessary points out of here. Probably just better off putting those points there. We do want our shield block here. That's going to be important. Everything else here is irrelevant. And this node right here is not too bad. And if you needed more defenses, you can pull points out of here and go down to here. Because this is for two-handed weapon, but if you were using the shield version of it, then you would put all of the available points down here.
Hello, traveler.
And pull out of this increased damage with two-handers.
Hello, traveler.
So this is just these points flex based on, am I using a shield or am I using a two? And right now we're just doing the shield version of it. These points over here are all really good. And then we put points over here. Now this guy is only level 92. And so if he still has some leveling to do, we're gonna have to get our void res and our necrotic res resolved later, but we're not gonna worry about those right now. But as you level, you're going to want to put points in lethal strikes and put points in molded by the forge. This increased melee critical strike chance and this increased crit multiplier, and then this increased attack speed with a two-handed sword is what makes this a really solid option for the two-handed sword version of the build. But if we're just using the shield version of the build, then we're going to come and take those points and move them down to here. And then 1 point up here in Avatar of War. And the rest of the points will start flushing over into Void Knot. Now, I was playing this guy as a whole lot of different builds. Rive, Warpath, you name it. We are going to show this guy as Healing Hands. So, Healing Hands, most important thing is Cleric's Hammer, Theros Blade, and Bane of Evil. We need Divine Barrier as well, and we need reduced mana cost, and so this will get us started. I'm playing this as a Forge Knight. And then we'll hop over here and see the Rain Dragons. Real quick rundown on our skills here. We do not need Warpath at all. We run Follow Reversal, run Ring of Shields, we run Sigils of Hope, and then we run Lunge. Nothing unusual here. We want our cooldown reduction on Lunge, we want our execute on Lunge, and then we'll want to immediately go over to Unstoppable down here. And Lunge on our bar. And we're just going to cast Ring of Shields on cooldown. It's an additional defense. And then we go. Now you can see here, damage is really solid on the Forge Guard. Right now we're hitting for 3 to 4k, 2 to 3k on targets right now at our level. And we don't even have Healing Hands fleshed out yet. We'll go over our ward here in a second once we get our ward set up. And then we'll obviously need to get our mana from Healing Hands under control, because it's currently super expensive to cast. And playstyle is exactly the same. There's nothing new here as far as the playstyle goes. You're going to use Seraph's Blade to do damage. Seraph's Blade is going to generate ward. Frostbite Shackles will do your ward retention for you. And you'll use attack speed now instead of a cast speed to scale your damage and your ward both. Attack speed becomes a very important skill for us. And you can see we're going to hit things really hard with a shield. Forge Guard gives us a lot of extra defenses that we don't have on the Paladin. We are running a few things different here. The first one is going to be Anvil Stance. Anvil Stance says if you directly used a throwing skill recently, then you take 25% less damage and you do 25% less damage. We really like the you take 25% less damage because it is a less than damage multiplier for us, which is absolutely phenomenal. It affects damage over time, which is the bane of Sentinels, and it affects hits, and it multiplies with all of your other damage reductions. And so, Anvil Stance is right here. Very, very strong skill. Now, if you wanted to, you can use a throwing skill. And so, like, if you're on a boss and you don't need the extra damage reduction, you can put Hammer Throw on your bar here. And now we'll throw our hammer, get out of Anvil Stance, and we hit things for literally like 50% more damage. I hit that guy for 5k, the other guy for 23k. It's a big damage boost that you can use just on bosses or just on large targets that you know you're not going to die from no matter what happens. But for your general play, the 25% damage reduction is going to be really, really good. Now, Forge Guard is also netting us 15% reduced damage from damage over time abilities. And that is Liquid Iron right here. It also causes you to double this less damage taken after you've used a potion recently. Now again, from arena standpoint, high-end standpoint, hits are not killing a Sentinel. It is damage over time abilities that are killing the Sentinel. And so being able to reduce that damage over time is the most important thing you can do for your character. It's the reason why the Erased Sentinel has armor mitigation for damage over time. And we don't have the option for much of that, but it's why we use the Champion Regalia body armor, because it is also our source of armor mitigation, applies to damage over time. Now, I don't have my two-hander is still on the Paladin over there. We'll hop over real quick and grab that just so that you can see the damage difference and change our spec over the two-handed version of this as well. And I think this is the version that is absolutely going to shine for the Forge Guard. The two-handed version gets extra attack speed from the Forge Guard tree, which is very, very strong for the build. Attack speed is incredibly important, along with all of the extra damage reduction and damage over time, Anvil Stance, and the sources of damage reduction that Forge Guard gets from armor when being hit, etc.
I cannot do that.
I know, I hear that you cannot do that. I heard it.
I cannot do that.
Oh my goodness.
I cannot do that.
I don't know what he's trying to do. Oh, he's trying to cast Ring of Shields because I have to augment. Now, for the two-handed version on this build, you want to use a sword.
Hello, traveler.
You do not want to use an axe. The reason for that is that bleed does nothing for you, and this gives you melee bleed chance with axes. That doesn't benefit us.
Hello, traveler.
Real quick respec here. And just for the sake of showing this, I'm going to pull points out of liquid iron. You would have liquid iron in here, but we want to get an idea of what the damage is going to be like whenever you have more skill points to spend in this tree. And so we move these
Hello,
points
traveler.
from down here up to here. We obviously don't need this block chance,
Hello, traveler.
but we need this block chance here. We want our multi, and we want our attack speed here.
Hello, traveler.
A real quick interruption here. I forgot to go over one thing, and it's important. It is shield break. So we are taking 3 out of 5 axe thrower, which is all you need, and then 4 out of 6 shield breaker to maintain fire shred stacks. And you can see when I come over and fight this guy, little axes, see the little axe fly off and target those guys? Those axes are going to automatically trigger from axe thrower, and everything they hit, they'll add stacks of fire shred to. That fire shred reduces the resistances of the targets so that you do more damage with your healing hands and your critic's hammer. It's just a passive, straightforward, no nonsense. Take the points and get them. You only need 3 in axe thrower, and 4 are required in shield breaker in order to get to hammer and anvil, which we need for anvil stance anyway. And so 4 out of 6 here, 3 out of 5 here, and let your axes go to work, and that's going to be a huge portion of your damage. It'll also let you not worry about this blessing. Normally you would have to run the shred fire resistance here, and instead on the Forge Guard version of the build we can run 100% increased fire damage, which is going to compensate us for the loss of 100% fire damage passive from the Paladin tree here, making the Forge Guard a much stronger overall option. And then everything else for the most part, you obviously you wouldn't need this block here, so we'd move this up here. You obviously wouldn't need this here. We
Hello,
can
traveler.
we can make some of these little changes too. The skill points from Void Knight to do it. Real quick. Here.
Hello, traveler. Hello, traveler. Hello, traveler.
We have axe thrower down here, so we only get 4 points in here. And then 1 more point in here. And then we get our volatile reversal back here. So now we have 163% attack speed with our Volcanus. Again, our crit needs a little bit of help
Do not dwell.
because we're only getting a 9% roll on Volcanus as a T5, but we're at 89% on the Forge Guard, whereas we're on 80% on the Paladin, so we need much less assistance from gear to reach that crit cap on the Forge Guard versus the Paladin. We're also netting an additional 60% crit multiplier and the additional attack speed. So a lot of gains on the Forge Guard. You take less damage from all attacks, you take less damage from damage over time attacks, you do more damage with your two-hander, and you do more critical strike damage with your two-hander, and you have a higher attack speed with your two-hander. Additionally, the Forge Guard gets more armor gained per hit, and so he's much less susceptible to dying to a lot of enemies attacking at the same time. Line is back in here. Now we are using anvil stance here, so we are going to do less damage than the Paladin per attack, but you can see the attack speed is crazy. We'll go over the attacks per second when we get to the end here. We are generating a little bit less ward on this guy right now. That's because everything is dying in one hit, and so we only ever get one proc of Cleric's Hammer in order to generate our ward here. Now this guy will also have a lot better gear in the end game because we can get our resistances squared around more easily on this. Forge Guard has a base 35% fire and 35% physical resistance that Paladin doesn't get, and the only loss is a little bit of elemental resistance from healing aura. And then we also have access to Ring of Shields, which is another layer of defense that absorbs ranged attacks, including ranged damage over time attacks, which is one of the nastiest things. And so in Arena, the only things that really killed me were the dogs that breathed fire on the Paladin, the wolves that breathed fire, and the skull, the Imperial Skull guy that floats around and shoots laser beams at you. And so, as you can see, solid build. I think at level 100 with the right gear, we'll be hitting for 8 to 9k with that attack, which is going to be slightly under the 10 to 16k the Paladin was hitting with the weapon, but many, many more defenses. So really solid choice. Now, as far as attacks per second go, on the Paladin, we're sitting at about 120% attack speed with a 1.1 speed weapon. That means that with Seraph's Blade, 1.1 speed weapon at 120% attack speed is 2.42 attacks per second. The base rate modifier for Healing Hands is like 1.467, which gets us up to 3.5 attacks per second. And then while we're proccing Cleric's Blade, that's going to be double that for a total of 7.1 swings per second on the Paladin. With the Forge Guard, we're at 1.1 times 163% attack speed, which is 2.8 per second. And then at a base rate of 1.467, that's 4.24. Which nets us 8.5 swings per second on the Forge Guard versus the 7 on the Paladin. So many, many more attacks over the time period means much more damage overall. The difference between those two is about 15%. We're doing 25% less damage. That means the Forge Guard is doing 10% less damage, 15% more ward generation, and is taking 25% less damage than the Paladin. The Paladin does have 100% increased damage for being at full health, but that's a loss in the damage area a little bit. But the Forge Guard makes up for that with lethal strikes, duelist, and obviously molded by the Forge, we already talked about. Now, I'll post links for both of these builds below, both a dual wield version, a two-handed version, a shield version, both for the Paladin and the Forge Guard. If you're just starting out, the Paladin is great. If you want to try something new, the Forge Guard is also amazing. And there's much less Forge Guards running around, and so sometimes it's fun not to play the flavor of the month. If you have any questions, leave comments down on YouTube. I do get to them, and I will respond as quickly as I see them. And if you don't want to wait for responses on YouTube, just hop over to my Twitch channel, link down below. All of these builds are made live in our Twitch channel, and they're constantly moving. So if you just want to see what you need to do, or if you have questions about your build, stop by, send me a link to your character, and tell me what's going on. We'll be more than happy to fix it. If your character is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's because you're missing some small little fundamental step for him to be successful. And we can usually find out in just a few seconds and help get you on the right path. And as always, and I know you've heard it 1,000 times, like, follow, subscribe. These are critical activities to allow content creators to continue creating content. I really appreciate it if you hop over to Twitch and just give me a follow there and say hi. I like to meet new people. Other than that, thank you very much, and y'all have an absolutely wonderful day.